Great. Listen, you mind if tonight we skip the game shows and reruns?
Okay, what do you suggest?
Glad you asked. Just go to Apple TV and type Hillsborough in the search bar.
Okay, done. What's on Hillsborough Television?
Take a look. Hillsborough Television is your connection to the community. They've got behind the scenes of your county in action, celebrations of our growing leisure and business opportunities, and hurricane preparation information.
Wow, I had no idea.
Pretty cool, huh? Now, let's tell them. Just so you know, it really is that easy. Just go to Apple TV, search for Hillsborough, load up the app, and connect to your community.
Okay, got some steak. Let's see.
In a world he didn't create, one hero defends the county, eradicating diseased, blood-sucking terrors. One kick at a time. A hero we deserve. Coming soon to a yard near you.
may think plastic bags can be recycled curbside, but they can't. When you put recyclables in a plastic bag, it gets tangled in the sorting machine and ruins recycling. Let's all properly recycle.
Let's all properly recycle. Let's all properly recycle. Let's all properly recycle. Leave out the plastic bags.
Good morning and welcome to the Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area Leadership Group. We're here on Friday, September 6th, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And just to keep extra order today, 2 gavels. Just wanted everybody to know. So we'll start with the welcome and introductions. Maybe we can go around the dais first and then go on to the audience. I think that's our usual. Senator Roussan.
Good morning. State Senator Darrell Roussan, District 19, Hillsborough and Pinellas County.
Excuse me? You have to push the red button for your
Thank you.
Good morning. Darrell Roussan, State Senator, District 19, Hillsborough and Pinellas Counties.
Thank you for being here today.
I'm John Villeneuve, Pasco County staff.
My name is Janet Long. I'm a Pinellas County Commissioner, countywide.
Darden Rice, City of St. Pete, City Council Member.
Dave Eggers, Pinellas County Commission.
Whit Blanton, Ford Pinellas.
Good morning, Beth Alden, Director of the Hillsborough MPO.
Pat Kemp, Hillsborough MP, Hillsborough County Commissioner, countywide.
Kimberly Overman, Hillsborough County, countywide, District 7.
Louis Vera, Tampa City Council, District 7. Pleasure to be here.
David Gwynn, District Secretary, Florida DOT.
David Green, Executive Director, T-BARTA.
And maybe we could start at this table.
Good morning. Brad Miller, CEO of Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority.
And good morning, Ben Limmer, CEO of HART.
Good morning. Sean Sullivan, Executive Director, Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council.
And then to the audience, if we could.
Representing St. Pete Tampa Aerial Transit.
Manny Lajri, Pasco MPO staff.
Peyton McLeod, Patel Green and Associates.
Kelsey Favreau, Fort Pinellas.
Stephen Benson, City of Tampa staff.
Jim Davison in Tampa.
Brian Passaro, T-BARTA.
Chris Jaddick with T-BARTA.
Cindy Raskin, T-BARTA.
Thank you.
Josh Baumgartner, Greater Tampa Chamber. Dave Sobush, Tampa Bay Partnership.
Hillary Lehman, Fort Pinellas.
And do we have anyone? Well, I think we do the back row back there. Okay, I think we have everybody introduced now, so we'll go to public comments. I have one public comment, Tom Nocero.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to extend an invitation. I believe that looking around the room, about 20% of you have already been to our office for a briefing on what our plans are for bringing an aerial transit solution to traffic congestion. And what I'd like to do is extend an open invitation to everyone else that hasn't been to visit us yet. We're in downtown Clearwater in the Bank of America building up in Suite 815. And we hope that you can make time in your schedules to come and see what we're up to and then be fully informed about what the future could be like for this entire region. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any further public comment. Okay, we'll move on to our legislative discussion.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much to Senator Roussan for joining us this morning. The purpose of this meeting, and we had a similar conversation last year, and thank you for joining us at that one too. So this is just an opportunity for us to catch up on the major priorities for this Tri-County metropolitan area. And talk about what we might want to work together on in the coming legislative session. So to start out with, I'd like to offer Senator Roussan the opportunity to make some remarks about what he observed over the past year and perhaps what we might anticipate in the coming year and things that we might want to work together on.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to be here. I want to thank you for the work that you have been doing since the last time I came. I think there's been some progress, maybe not as much as the public has appetite for, because folks are really tired of congestion, inactivity, and they want to see solutions. And so I congratulate you for continuing to meet and to work on improvements to the transportation issues and problems that exist in Tampa Bay. As chair of the Hillsborough County Legislative Delegation, I'm committed to supporting a resolution that we will hear on Monday at the Hillsborough delegation meeting. That resolution will be for the entire delegation to get behind and support fully funding the I-275 State Road 60 West Shore Interchange project. It's important that this linchpin connection is improved to enable livability and economic growth to provide for existing and future traffic demands. And I'm very proud to be able to present that to the delegation on Monday for its vote. I think that's a critical component. Secondly, as you know, the legislature this year passed MCOR, multi-use corridors of regional economic significance, the creation of 3 task forces to study the Suncoast Connector, the Northern Turnpike Connector, and the Southwest Central Florida Connector. That task force is beginning its work and will report to us by November of 2020. I expect that we will not hear a lot about solutions until they've completed their work and met, but I'm very excited that the environmental groups have a seat at the table, and hopefully they will be assertive in their work, and we will hear back from these task forces about implementation, the problems of implementation, the blessings of implementation, and the impact to our community. Lastly, I'm open to novel ideas to improve our traffic situation in Tampa Bay. This past legislative session, I was a part of a team of legislators that secured $1 million for T-BARTER to be used for the study and development of innovative options for transit. Innovative options can include and should include smart city innovations, autonomous vehicle services, multimodal transportation, Hyperloop technology, cable and lightweight overhead road or string types of above-ground transport and public zero emissions transit. There may be more than one solution to the problems that we're experiencing, and that's what I'm hopeful that this money will help TBARTA in identifying. And so with that, I look forward to a great session. I look forward to listening to some of your ideas and being a champion for this region, along with the other senators and state representatives that represent Hillsborough County. And I invite you all to come to the delegation meeting, which will be 9 o'clock at the Regent in Riverview this Monday, September 19th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that and say that we greatly appreciate your leadership and support with advocating for that I-275 State Route 60 interchange. It's something that we've been talking about a lot here as the major bottleneck at the east end of the Howard Franklin Bridge. It affects all of us in this room and many people outside this room. And we have been talking about the importance of speaking with one voice and putting that project at the top of our TMA priority list, and bringing it around to our local governments as one of our top priorities is one way that we are trying to do that, to speak with one voice. And it is so great to have the partnership of the Hillsborough Legislative Delegation as part of that.
I don't know. Others have comments? Sure. Commissioner Eggers.
Senator, I also wanted to extend my appreciation for your being here. It's always good to see you. Yeah, one of the things that, and I was talking to somebody yesterday about this meeting, just kind of in general, and saying that we around this room don't always agree on things, and we sometimes roll up our sleeves and do a lot of the work, but at least we're getting together and talking, and we're trying to find the common ground, and this project that you brought up is one of those common grounds, and the other is how we govern ourselves on a regional level. And I know that there seems to be a lot of different thoughts in Tallahassee about that governance model for our area. We each of our counties have MPOs. We all decided some years back, people before us that are sitting at this table, or some of us sitting at this table, that having a regional group would be important to start to talk, as you said, with one voice. And so I just wondered what your thoughts were on that model, that TMA model, the one we have now, versus a super MPO, one MPO for the whole region. Just some of your thoughts. Maybe you haven't gotten to a final place yet on that, but just some of your thoughts on that.
Well, thank you for that observation. And you are exactly right. As there is differences and divergence in opinions among this group, there exists that in Tallahassee.
Really?
But we continue to meet as committees doing the work to bring it to session, and I'm encouraged every year that we continue that collaboration, that there will be solutions. I have to be optimistic in my thought and in my approach. In terms of the current model, I think it's a good model. But I also must emphasize that people want action. They want to see something done. They want to see something tangible as a result of this model. And so I support the model as opposed to one regional MPO, but I challenge us all. And I'm not just speaking down to you, I'm speaking to myself also, that I need to collaborate better and more with my colleagues in urging that this solution be brought forward as soon as possible.
Thank you. Right, and we're keenly aware of the leadership that we have in Tallahassee now, so it'd be a really good time for us to be collaborating and getting things done. So thank you. Appreciate your being here.
Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Rusan, since you are here and you are so optimistic, for having a little bit of common sense still and not agreeing to pile on to the amicus brief against the referendum that was held in Hillsborough County. It is boggling my mind to think that the legislators don't want to abide by the will of the people, and I surely hope that the Senate will use its good judgment and not pile on, as President Galvano has indicated he had no interest in doing. So thank you for that.
Comment. Senator, I wanted to bring something to your attention that we're wrestling with a little bit in Pinellas County, and I think a couple of other counties around the state, Miami-Dade in particular, and Broward as well, and that is our funding situation with state and federal transportation dollars. We're having an imbalance in the revenues that we're forecasting for 2045. We have a lot of highway money that we're able to bring into Pinellas County, but we don't have a lot of highways that we need to build or want to build. And one of the issues is that a lot of the dollars are prescribed to the strategic intermodal system. And thanks to FDOT's leadership, we've got most of our strategic intermodal system committed for construction. I-275, the Gateway Expressway, these are great projects that we've asked for. Some of US 19 is in the strategic intermodal system, and it's got overpasses being built or innovative intersections that we're looking at as well. But after that, we're sort of done, and we're not able to take down our fair share of state revenues because of the geography of Pinellas County and the constraints that we have as an urban developed county. So what I would ask for you is to think about is some flexibility in some of those funding sources. For instance, using the SIS to fund better transit within the strategic intermodal system corridors would be one example, or even parallel facilities. The other issue is we have a fund program called Other Arterials, which is for state highways that aren't on the SIS network. And we aren't widening a bunch of state roads in Pinellas County because we've widened Ulmerton Road and we've widened East Bay and Roosevelt about as far as they're going to be. And the challenge with Other Arterials is that if we want to take those dollars and apply them to a parallel road, like 126th Avenue, which would help truck traffic and connectivity and improve Ulmerton Road, then we're being told that we're going to need to come up with half the dollars for those projects, and that money is not as fungible as it could be. So we're exploring that with FDOT, and I think they're willing to work with us. But we may need to look at some legislative remedies to broaden the flexibility. And I've mentioned this to you a few times in the past, and just like you to think about that. It's facing a lot of our counties. I think Hillsborough County is probably in the same boat. You don't want to widen roads everywhere either.
Right.
And I think Pasco County is going to get to that point pretty soon too. So having greater flexibility so that groups like this can be more creative and can be more able to build partnerships, I think would go a long way. So just kind of keep that in mind if you would. Thank you.
So noted.
I just think you bring up a really good point. Our emphasis, I think, on the strategic intermodal system as what we fund, and especially when funds are getting to be less and less. And I understand what you're saying with regards to Pinellas, but I think the real need is so much more on the arterial roads. And, we find these interstates are funded, and even if they can't be widened enough to ever deal with the congestion traffic because there's induced demand. But even if they are, what happens is they pile up at the exits. We have that happening hugely in Apollo Beach here. And you just, you can't, because you can't widen the arterial road or don't have the finances, and that's where your needs are, I think, much more than your strategic intermodal system. I just like to go through a series of concerns, and I'm sorry that I bring this up here first because I would have liked to have it before before this meeting, but it has just come to my attention because I would have brought it to FDOT before. But as far as the plans for the Howard Franklin Bridge and West Shore and Gateway, I was looking at or had a presentation on resiliency and sea level rise. And what I what they said from NOAA was that NOAA is now saying minimum 4 feet of sea level rise, I think by 2040, and very possible we could be looking at, within the lifetime of the Howard Franklin Bridge, an 8-foot sea level rise. As I understand, we're building it for a sea level rise of 1.5 feet. And I think that that's really concerning, and that we should really be thinking about the lifetime of that, lifespan of that bridge, and how much sea level rise we would have, and the, what we do in terms of that with resiliency. That's my first point. I would also like you to know, and everyone to know, that as far as I-275 north of the downtown interchange in Hillsborough County, 4 out of 5 county commissioners, a majority, voted against the tip because they don't want that funded or widened. When you widen these roads through cities, and the latest watershed studies show that the effects of the air pollution on communities within a half mile, the particulate matter is causing, and you can see it on our mapping that we have available, that we have terrible asthma, childhood asthma. There's been now studies showing cardiovascular disease, cancer, and even dementia. And these are the latest science. And I think it's really important for us, when we're talking about expanding roadways with residents on both sides, and where they're getting particulate and pollution, and that will come even with electric cars, because a lot of the particulate and most dangerous outfall is from tires, and particulate matter from tires and brakes. So I think it's really concerning, and I just would like to let you know that a majority of our county commission has voted against any expansion, any extra lanes added, any extra roadway added to 275 north of downtown Tampa. The other that I would like to speak to you about is the MCORs. I call it the tollways through the wilderness. But in terms of that, we could say much about what that will do, and the money it's diverting, and the attention and time away from serious projects, especially when we have limits on what we can do. But I just like to, and everyone here, I think should, I went to the MCORS hearing they had here, and I read this from a 2016 article in the Tampa Bay Times. And it says, before the Suncoast Parkway opened, a consultant predicted that it would be so full of cars, its toll booths would rake in $150 million a year by 2014. The forecast wasn't close, nor were the next two. The consultant eventually settled on a forecast of $38 million. So it went from $150 million to $38 million. But when 2014 rolled around, the road was so empty, it collected a mere $22 million. Yet the Florida Department of Transportation now wants to spend $256.7 million to extend the Suncoast another 13 miles north through Citrus County. And the projections that DOT is relying on to justify what has been dubbed Suncoast 2 are from the same consultant that got the first phase so wrong. So, I mean, I think we really have to be thinking about our investments and how we're spending what are becoming fewer and fewer dollars to invest in our roads, and they're coming from general funding, since no longer will gas tax support, even our federal money is coming from general revenue. So I'm all about transit investment, and looking away from the CIS, and looking to our arterial roads, and talking about resiliency in the future. So that would be my issues. I know there's others.
Well, good morning, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Commissioner Starkey from Pasco County. We met many years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
And gosh, I hope more senators follow your example and come meet with us. It's awesome. I'm going to speak about
Well,
something.
they may be reluctant when they realize it's two gavels brought together.
I'll hide one. I'll hide one. There you go. Pass one, you'll feel better.
My comments are going to be a little different here, and I hope Secretary Gwynn will correct me, or his staff, if I'm wrong, because I haven't done enough research on this, and I'm getting ready to. But I've talked a little bit here about the, technology is bringing different modes of transit, and I just came back from a trip where I visited many countries, and you see all kinds of hoverboards and electric scooters, and I saw some fascinating little three-wheeled cars overseas. And we are building trails and multi-use trails everywhere, and we've come across this interesting situation in Pasco County where we're working to put a sidewalk under US 19 that will connect the land side kind of to our coastal side. And we think it'll be a big economic driver for that part of our county. It's in the Miller's Bayou area, and ULI identified that as our #1 focus for the 19 quarter, which has seen a major decline in property values. But we cannot have golf carts go on it. And one of the reasons that we're building it is to lower the pedestrian deaths. And but because it's crossing a state road, golf carts cannot use the trail even though it's going under a bridge. And so I think we need to relook at that policy. And I understand that it stems from an attorney general decision that the liability was too high for the state. But I think we need to relook at that. I think it isn't making sense. And, I envision maybe one day when we're building trails along state roads and we have a multi-use trail on one side and a sidewalk that really doesn't get used on the other, perhaps we can put motorized, and these would be motorized, I don't want to say vehicles, motorized things that go at slower speeds, but we should allow for that because that's what's coming in this world. And right now we prohibit it, and we need to find a way to include it.
Well, thank you for those comments. And let me say that I'm here not just to share what I think will be coming up in session, but also to listen. And what I've heard you say is flexibility and fair share of revenues, flexibility in spending those that are directed towards you. The environment is important. When I toured USF Medical School just last week, and I could see the harbor, the water, two blocks away from the building. I asked about sea level rise, and they explained to me that when that was brought up, they now have built a buffer on the first floor of that building so that it would take more than a 21-foot storm surge in order to knock that building out. So there's concern, there's forethought about sea level rise and the impact on the environment, and also investment efficiency, where we do put dollars, make sure that it's being spent appropriately on the project. So, and consistent evaluation is what you brought up, Commissioner Starkey, evaluating common sense application of what we're doing, designs and work. So I received this information and I will take it back to the legislature.
Thank you very much for being here. As a new commissioner and as a strong advocate for both smart growth, smart transit, as well as coordinating and partnering on a regional basis, I'm looking at the economic opportunity for all of our region to really work together on looking at what assets we have in place and how to maximize the use of those assets. The good news is that the citizens of Hillsborough County made a decision that they thought that there was a wise investment opportunity within not only improving the quality of our roads and connectivity among our communities, but also investing in transit assets in order to make sure that we create an opportunity for people to get to work and create an economic opportunity to develop in a smart way, where we build, homes and businesses along our major transit assets. And when I say transit, not just, bus lines and rail lines, but also our transportation lines, where we look at opportunities to invest and address the fact that we have a climate migration challenge. Florida's a pretty cool place to live. And when companies choose to move here, they recognize getting them to move away is not an easy thing to do. So we want to make sure that our attractiveness as a region, not only that brings people here, but also can serve those folks. And with the growth rates we're experiencing and the things that we're seeing based on all of our MPO's research on can we actually address the demand for people getting around in the way we have been, most of their studies have indicated that we can't do it with just roads. And that's why the equality and the flexibility in how we fund helping people get around our region is so important. Because when we limit it to just building capacity via roads or highways, we find ourselves really challenged. People get stuck and they're not happy about it. So having some flexibility on our arterial roads is critically important. Recognizing the value of the assets that grew this region, the rails that actually came here and helped bring these regions to the growth that and the wonderful communities we have now is important. And while we haven't really moved as forward on it yet, HART has an agency now. If we are able to protect and preserve the surtax dollars that our citizens voted for, if we're able to preserve those dollars for investment in our community, it creates a great opportunity not only for a local project for Hillsborough County, but great opportunity to connect all of our region together, because it's a footprint that goes and hits every single one of our areas. And if we're able to work together to use that asset or use that right away, and I'm not owning what the technology on it is, but use that right away as a way of connecting all of our communities and helping people move efficiently from one region to another. By working together, we can create an opportunity for growth in this area that's managed in a way that doesn't do it the way we as Hillsborough have done it, which is to sprawl to places where, land is a little cheaper and it's easier for people to afford. Affordability is doable if we look at our land use as well as our transit assets and look at those corridors where we're building. We've done it with our roads, but we also need to do it with other ways. And I think using our rail assets or rail opportunities, the footprint that CSX offers to us as a starting place, as a conversation on how to address getting people around regionally, I think we can get there. And we haven't really seen a lot of support in Tallahassee for that conversation, unless it's AV driven. It's the bright new shiny toy that we're all excited about. And I don't disagree that it's a great opportunity to do ways to get people around efficiently. But I think it's important to realize we have an asset in our area that we could use Tallahassee's help in making sure that it's most best use, not only with freight, but also with our commuters and our tourists that come to this area and the companies that are looking for that. Our competitiveness is in jeopardy if we don't recognize how important the whole region is to offering an opportunity for companies to come here. And when a company can't get an employee who lives in Pasco County to go to South Tampa to work or to go to South County to work, we have a problem. We have a challenge. And I think this group has had that conversation in each of our individual MPOs and positions as either commissioner cities. And I know that Pinellas is built out, so your challenges are a little more difficult than in some respects. But I think they are the same in some respects. If we don't create connectivity in our land use as well as our transportation grid, we're going to be challenged with having congestion be our major impediment to growth and taking care of those that want to work and live here. So that message, I think, is we've all said at some point in time, but I think it is also helpful for Tallahassee to realize that we're going to look for every opportunity we can. And Hillsborough voters have actually spoken with their vote. And it's critically important, to your point earlier, that Tallahassee helps us make sure that we can best utilize those resources that our voters have voted for. And I appreciate your being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me just say that smart road design is important. Efficiency of investment is important. environment and its impact is important. And I think we get that. I think the problem with rail has been the cost of rail and whether we're being really innovative and thinking of the future without looking at other innovative designs and modes of transportation. So I receive your comments with those caveats.
Sure. Thank you.
And Commissioner Mariana, I'll recognize you in just a second. I just wanted to respond to that for a second. I'm sorry, but just so you know, I mean, the CSX, our Heart board voted unanimously to pursue CSX for Hillsborough County. But the cost, for instance, of 1 mile of building the I-4 connector to the Leroy Salmon Expressway, it's elevated, but it costs $600 million for 1 mile. The cost of the rail, the Suncoast, Sunrail in Orlando, just a few years ago, to buy the right-of-way, to buy the rail, to set up the stations, everything was $20 million a mile. And we're now spending about $120 million in this phase of I-275 changes. So I just to respond to that a little, but Commissioner Mariano.
Thank you, Senator, for being here. It's great to have your participation. To talk about just a couple of things, as far as Commissioner Stark, you talking about that US 19 underpass. Redevelopment is probably the hardest thing to work with in an area. And this is like a really good redevelopment project that could go. That flexibility would be phenomenal if we can get it. To talk about CSX, BRT, BRT is just the easiest one to get through right now. I'm fully supportive of that. Hopefully that keeps on rolling. But I think it's very wise to actually take a look at the cost of the acquisition of the CSX line. I mean, the line runs very little, doesn't do much service, but because of the control, the power that CSX has over that, they can control what that cost is. It may work out better that we even have a private sector person come in to go build it, run it in some type of other form of transportation. The value of that line is great, but as far as what the benefit to what I think they were given to create a rail line is diminished now, and for them to actually hold up a super high value is actually hurting the infrastructure that could actually be a much better benefit. So if there's a way to change how that gets appraised, how it can get negotiated, would probably be a great help to us. Thanks.
I don't see any other cards up. Are there others that want to speak? Sure.
Just briefly, I'll say thank you, Senator, for being here. And you're my personal representative as well, so thank you for the work you do for all of us in Tallahassee. And I think this has been a really great conversation. I remember in the last year or two, our MPO has held some workshops where we talked about things to improve and brainstorming, and one of the ideas that we came up with was actually having a position on a board that would be where a House or a Senate elected official would sit with us or attend our meetings. So this that didn't go very far, but the value of this conversation to me really affirms that that's a great idea, and that the more that we have meetings with our state and House elected officials is positive. And on the other side, if whatever we can do as individual or collective MPOs to communicate better to you, please let us know what we can do to be more effective.
Well, seeing no one else, thank you so much, Senator Roussan, for being here. You're also my elected representative. I think yours also. So you cover all three of our districts. So, but thank you so much for being here. I think it was a really good conversation. We will move on to formally establishing the TMA.
And before, if I may, Madam Chairwoman, I have a request, if I may. I unfortunately, due to a private sector obligation, have to leave at about 11:20, and I see at 11:30 we have the Kinnan-Mansfield connection discussion under other updates. Is there any way that could be moved up?
Does anyone object to us changing and putting that first? We see no objections. Why don't we just
Thank
do
you.
that to
I
accommodate?
appreciate it. Just
Mhm.
whenever, just before that time is fine.
Well, maybe just right now. Might as well.
Even better. Thank you. And if I may I speak before, if I may?
Sure. I don't know how this presentation was, or what were we?
It's just a brief verbal update from Pasco MPO.
Okay, and you'd like to speak before the update? Okay.
If I may. No, just that this is something that's very important to my constituents in many parts of the city of Tampa. This particularly has to do with the area of New Tampa, 33647, an area where there's just been tremendous growth over the last 30, 40 years. I always cite the statistics that many of us know that in 1990, 33647 had about 8,000 people. You fast forward about 10 years later, it's about 23,000, 24, 25,000. Today that number stands, depending on what numbers you look at and what you use, 50, 55,000 individuals. I always joke that about New Tampa, that it seems to be a size 38 waist that's wearing size 37 pants, and every day we're eating at Steak and Shake. So it's an area that continues to grow, even to the point of irresponsible growth, and I know that's certainly something that a lot of us are very passionate about. This Ken and Mansfield issue is an issue that's very, very important to my constituents, and I think also to the good folks in Pasco County. I think there's a lot of mutual benefit there. As the presentation will talk about, this is just an undeveloped stretch of road. It boggles the mind. It's one of those things where you just can't see over the last 15, 20 years how the two sides can't work something out. About 30 or so feet of road that's undeveloped that divides city of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and Pasco County. And literally, you can throw a baseball over the side. Again, it boggles the mind. I know Pasco County MPO has recently taken a formal position with regards to the Ken and Mansfield connection, as opposed to other connections that we certainly look forward to making. There are other immediate compromises that are being looked at that I'd love to address. Things like, for example, connecting it obviously for first responders. That's the number one real compelling reason to get this connected, is for first responders, as well as for bicyclists and pedestrians. And then we can deal with the other disputed issues later on. So we're certainly here to continue to have dialogue, but I just wanted to bring this issue up because it is an important regional issue. Thank you, Madam.
Commissioner Starkey.
I believe, now this is Commissioner Moore's district, and he's heavily involved in that, but I believe we did agree to those two,
Yes.
two issues, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And should we have an update now, I guess?
So
Or?
I will just give you a brief update, and you're right, if you've ever been to a place like Israel and you look over at Lebanon, that's what it looks like. So the reality of it is that our board supported the residents of the area initially because they're concerned about high speed in that area. So the recommendation that they made is to pursue with Hillsborough and City of Tampa the opportunity to do at least initially an emergency connection with bike ped. And initially, they did not oppose anything at Meadow Point. They didn't oppose anything that would occur at Oldswoods in future. We think that ultimately Meadow Point may be the nice thoroughfare north-south. And so it doesn't mean it can't be revisited in the future. But for now, I think the issue was let's at least do something with it. Let's at least connect for emergency and then go from there. So we've had discussions with Hillsborough County. As soon as they get back to us, we're going to go meet with City of Tampa, and then we're going to see how we can pull it all together.
That's great.
Something will occur. It may not be the full Monty, as you will, but something should occur.
You know, in hindsight, I think, we put two schools, maybe three, on that road, and that's really where the challenge is, with all the kids going to school and the parents queuing up, that the road becomes a bottleneck already. So, because normally I am all about connectivity, and maybe one day the parents and will feel more comfortable, but at least we'll get that road built and connected with that first responder gate to start with, and maybe then we can give it a try. But I think that's our first baby step. But we will have those other connections.
Yep, and if I may?
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, and, we continue to disagree on the larger issue, but, I also wanted to ask, I know that about a year and a half ago, County Commissioner Hagan put forth, and it was voted on and supported, $250,000 for that connection. Is that, we've always been unclear on that to a degree, are those funds that could be used to make this connection happen? As my understanding is those funds are still there, and potentially for use for that connector. Probably wouldn't know off the top of your head.
They probably are, but we couldn't say right now. But I would imagine they are.
But the primary purpose is to build a road, And so whether it's an emergency road or a road for vehicles, that's what our funding and any funding that they would propose would have been
Yep.
anticipated to be used for. So the road is the first thing.
Yep.
Let's get the road built between the two.
Yep, and for me, the public well-being and safety issue is the most pivotal issue that we're dealing with. And I have a constituent, Mr. Otto Schlosser, I believe his name is, from K-Bar Ranch, who suffered some significant burns due to a frying pan mishap and had to wait about, I think it was about an hour and a half or so for to ultimately get to the hospital. And, you know, public safety is the most important core issue for local government. So I want to put that first, and I want to make sure that the city of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and our friends in Pasco County work together to making that first step work. You know, I want to hit a home run with this, but I'll take a double for right now, you know, and I think that's important. So I would ask formally that we, you know, set up a time to meet so that we can talk. And I live in Hunters Green, so I'm not too darn far away from you all, so I'd love to go over and talk outside of here.
But you'll have to go around.
Exactly. There you
Or
go.
four-wheel it.
I take Brewsby Downs, but that's all right.
And
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore has extended that he's happy to speak with you at any
Yeah.
time about it. So
And yeah, and he and I talk
appreciate
about
your
it.
concern. Yeah.
Thank
We'll
you.
let you all arrange that. Thanks for that discussion. Is there any more? Okay, we'll go back now.
Madam Chair?
Sorry?
Madam Chair?
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
And
Commissioner
I'd like to
Mariano.
echo the sentiments as expressed already. The Mansfield connection is a very tough connection. It's a very narrow road, winds through, so it's really tough to see a lot of traffic going through. So I'm sympathetic to the residents on that part. The compromise, I think, to make the emergency connections, we're fully on board with. With all the growth that's been permitted and allowed in that area, you know, I think we need to work together, and maybe you guys need to bring those developers to the table to actually help out with a lot more of the costs, so it doesn't fall on the burden of us. But if they want to grow, we make, you know, we have some pretty substantial impact fees in Pasco County for transportation. If you guys do have it or not, at least maybe pipeline projects to help fund those things would probably be good.
I don't know about the city, but we do not.
Yeah.
Trying to work on that, but.
And if I may, Commissioner or
Sure.
Chairwoman, thank you. Yeah, and again, we continue to disagree on the Kin and Mansfield issue respectfully. I mean, I think if you look at, if memory serves me right on the MPO's survey, I think it was a 52-48 split. So I don't, if memory serves me right, I don't think it's overwhelming on one side or the other. But again, I want to focus on that double, which is public safety first. That's the most pivotal issue for me.
Absolutely. And the trail.
Yes, precisely. Thank
And
you.
in fairness, the original study wasn't just about connection. It was about treatments in those corridors, turn lanes, queuing lanes, that sort of thing to make it safe. So those kind of implementations can still be done along those roads and create really a safer and better environment.
Thank you. And thank you for the accommodation. Thank you.
Okay, so that discussion is wrapped up here. Okay, so we'll move now back to the formally establishing the TMA.
Thank you, and I'll just introduce this briefly while Whit is pulling the slides up. So this conversation follows up on a couple of our previous meetings where we talked about creating bylaws for the TMA, and we looked at our existing structure, our existing regional agreements, which are part of the TBARTA MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee. And so since that time, we've dug into that a little bit further on how we could make the TMA leadership group part of that existing structure so that we're not reinventing the wheel at all. And we did bring that to the CCC meeting over the summer. That discussion was, I think, pretty positive with the other 3 MPOs in the larger region. About having the TMA leadership group as part of the larger regional structure. So with that, I'll turn it over to Whit.
Thanks, Beth. And I'll introduce myself again. I'm Whit Blanton with Ford Pinellas. This is very much a draft that we're presenting to you. It's a conversation starter. This is based on a memo that I've drafted that nobody's given any comments yet on or even seen. So you're getting a preview of this. But a little bit of backdrop is that, we do take our roles here seriously. I think we all do. And the conversations that you mentioned, Senator, about getting together and working on and making improvements are really important. And some of those improvements are baby steps and some are big. And I think the organizational framework is a bit of a baby step, but it's still nonetheless important. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about is how we align the work of the MPOs and the work of TBARDA and the work of the broader region to focus on the things that we are obligated to focus on and statutorily required to focus on, and clarify the roles and responsibilities. And I'm going to start with the Chair's Coordinating Committee, which is a larger entity that governs the MPOs or holds the MPOs together, really, from Citrus County all the way down to Sarasota County and includes Polk County. And we've been formally established since 1993. And it is a good collaborative forum for regional alignment and regional decision making. And the MPOs are responsible for filling certain federal requirements and state obligations for inter and intra-regional coordination on our transportation planning efforts. This has evolved over time. We've had different federal laws that have given us new responsibilities, and we've implemented those new responsibilities. We've had different state statutes that have changed, and we've implemented those. And we've embodied our work excuse me, in 3 guiding documents: an interlocal agreement between all the MPO members of the Chair's Coordinating Committee so that we know how we work well together, who's responsible for what, and how our protocols occur. We have operating procedures for the Chair's Coordinating Committee that identify very specific responsibilities for each of us. And then further, when TBARDA was created, we established a staff services agreement for TBARDA to assist us in carrying out some of those functions. Our proposal that we're just really starting the conversation about is to realign those MPO responsibilities back under the Chair's Coordinating Committee framework to meet those federal and state funding requirements. We have to have certain things in our plans and our certain work products developed. The MPO staff directors would resume the administration and management responsibilities of the Chair's Coordinating Committee. And the TMA leadership group, which we presented to this body, about 3 months ago, 2 meetings ago, maybe?
2 meetings ago.
2 meetings ago, would be a focus area within the Chair's Coordinating Committee. And what that does, to Beth's point, is it streamlines the number of agreements that we have to have. The TMA leadership group does not have any formal agreement. We have about a 2-paragraph document that is really an aspirational statement of how we'll work together. And we need maybe things like a dispute resolution process. We need things that the CCC has in state statute. This would also enable TBARDA, the transit agency for our region, to focus on its core mission to advance regional transit and not necessarily get too into the weeds of a multi-use trails network or a regional congestion management process and some of those things. The thought is that we would transition beginning in 2020 and move back to the quarterly responsibilities that the MPOs had from 1993 on up to about 2012 or so. And that would refocus some of our work products and responsibilities. There are some things that are in statute that we really don't do anymore and maybe don't need to do anymore, and there's some things that are coming down the pike potentially with new federal authorization that we need to be ready for. So times change, as do institutions, and we recognize in this room, all of us, that transportation has become a major local and regional issue in Tampa Bay, and its importance continues to rise in every survey I see. We do have an increasingly diverse region that makes for many viewpoints and perspectives, and to Senator Roussan's point earlier, that diversity might mean that we need a bunch of different organizations that come together in this kind of collaborative fashion. We do have an ongoing question about regional governance, and that started in the 90s with a letter from, I think, Governor Graham. So it's been a long time, or maybe it was Governor Childs, one of those two. And then most recently, we completed the regional MPO coordination study under TBARDA's guidance, and that provided some examples for us to look to as how we can strengthen our regional partnerships. And we're examining all those, and this is a direct outgrowth of that. So from our perspective, it's really important that we have a clarity of the mission, roles, and responsibilities of each of us. And we do have many voices. There is no single forum. This might be about the best forum we have for multimodal transportation in our region. And then TBARDA is a really good forum for regional transit discussions. So we're going to have to collaborate regardless. MPOs do have unique federal and state authority for developing long-range plans and setting multimodal transportation priorities. We are the conveners and the facilitators. I like to say we don't produce anything except good decisions, and that's hopefully where we are as a group. Florida also has some unique laws, rules, and requirements for funding that are different than many other states. And it does take a partnership to get those things done. So Florida might need some unique structures that you don't need in Nebraska and you don't need in Georgia. And so what we really want to do is clarify the TBARTA and CCC relationship. And I don't know how well y'all can read this. It doesn't look like you can, so I'll just really specifically go in. There's been some developments. In '93, the CCC was established in state statutes for 6 MPOs, 8 counties. We had quarterly responsibilities at a staff level, and that rotated for each MPO. In 2007, TBARTA was created. I had a hand in developing that. And that covered 5 MPOs and 7 counties from Citrus to Sarasota. Polk chose to opt out of TBARTA, but they participated at a staff level. And in 2012, we felt like it was good to give TBARTA some things to help us with. And so we assigned them administrative support, agreed to pay about $30,000 a year from all the MPOs. And they essentially managed the agendas, agenda development process, meeting facilitation for a whole host of things, from the MPO staff directors that met pretty regularly to the Joint Citizens Advisory Committee, the Multi-Use Trails Committee, the Transportation Regional Incentive Program Working Group. And that is a unique funding source that the state has underfunded in the last 10 or 15 years. That is a good state-local partnership on regional transportation solutions. And so all those things TBARTA did, and I think TBARTA did a pretty good job at all those things. But then in 2015, the legislature came along and changed a little bit. They gave TBARTA full responsibility for administration and direction of the CCC, and we modified our interlocal agreement to account for that. And then in 2017, the legislature refocused TBARTA into a smaller geographic footprint of only 5 counties and focused its mission on transit, on regional transit development. And many of us think that's a good thing, because regional transit, cross-county transit, is really hard for the individual county-based transit agencies to do given limited resources. So it's good that somebody's focusing on that. But I think that has created some confusion, and it's created some uncertainty. And honestly, from our staff perspective in Pinellas, we feel a little disconnected to the CCC and the development of our MPO products, because we've had TBARTA doing it for us. And when you have that relationship, you tend to get a little more passive on those things. And I think we need to be more active than passive. So the suggestion here, and we're all in agreement on this, at least at the staff level, and we'll see how far that goes in terms of feedback and comments on this proposal. For 2020, what we're actually recommending is that the MPO staff will resume that shared responsibility for the Chairs Coordinating Committee. We already do it for the TMA Leadership Group. The staff directors, to sort of make sure that we're providing TBARTA the ability to give direction and function in the administration, is the staff directors would then present our meeting agendas and proposed actions of the Chairs Coordinating Committee board to the TBARTA board prior to any Chairs Coordinating Committee board meeting. That way TBARTA can review those materials, give input, provide commentary. We can take that to the Chairs Coordinating Committee, and that can be reflected. TBARTA has offered at a staff level to continue hosting the Chairs Coordinating Committee meeting notices, materials, and work products on its website. So we have a central repository that's a regular routine place for those to be held, rather than trying to figure out who's got the latest version in one of the 6 MPOs. And then TBARTA will provide meeting space for all of the different committee meetings. And we may choose to move around, but it's a good central location, and even if they relocate somewhere else, we think they'll be centrally located, and that could be a good function for that space. We have also established a schedule for 2020 that, again, you're not going to be able to see this, but what it does is it shows beginning with Sarasota Manatee MPO. They will be responsible for that first quarter, then Polk, then Ford Pinellas, then Hillsborough. And what this would really enable us to do is align all our many meetings so that right now in 2019, we've had 7 meetings of the Chairs Coordinating Committee and the TMA, 5 of the TMA and 2 of the Chairs Coordinating Committee. This would enable us to streamline that to 4 by having meetings on the same day. It might make for some long meetings, but frankly, you're committed all day, many cases anyway. And that would allow us to just be a lot more efficient. And who's not in favor of streamlined government meetings? And that would also allow us to align our subcommittees to provide input to the Chair's Coordinating Committee. And one thing that I think it would do is just increase the relevance of the Chair's Coordinating Committee. 20 years ago, when I went to all their meetings, it seemed like they were really relevant. It seems like in the last several years, as TBARTA has risen in profile, and we've gone from, 4 or 5 meetings a year down to 2 meetings a year, and the staff directors used to meet every 2 weeks. Now we don't meet nearly as often. It just hasn't been as relevant. And I think this would align many of our work products to make them more relevant. And Beth talks a lot about, she's got equal needs with Polk and Manatee County to coordinate. We certainly coordinate with Manatee County via the Sunshine Skyway. So I think this just does bring us together a lot better. And Beth, I'll open it up to you to see if you want to add anything or if I missed anything at this point.
No, I think you did a great job. Thanks for covering all that.
Sure. I have submitted this memo in a memo format to TBARTA to get their feedback. Once I get their feedback, I will share this memo with all the MPO staff directors and get their feedback. And then the idea would be that this would be an agreement in place informally that would govern our actions pending any potential changes in state statute that TBARTA may be pursuing in the 2020 legislative session.
Great. That was as comprehensible as I've ever seen. Good
Thanks
job.
to help from Beth.
Commissioner Long?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before we get into a deep dive discussion on your presentation, Whit, I just want to let everybody know, especially Senator Rusan, who I've already spoken to about this issue, that in our legislative ask from TBARTA, we are recommending that the legislature take the CCC out of the responsibilities of TBARTA. And since we have our executive director for TBARTA here, maybe you'd like to weigh in if you've had a chance to review Whit's memo and comment on it. David Green.
Thank you, Commissioner Long. No, I've actually not had a chance to review the memo that Whit's talking about, so I really can't comment on it at all. I'm a little bit familiar with some of the content that I believe is probably in there. And I think Whit did a great job capturing in his comments how things have certainly evolved over the years. There was a seismic shift. 2017, when the legislature changed TBARTA's focus from being a regional transportation authority to one focusing specifically on transit, it created an even greater misalignment between TBARTA and the CCC and MPOs than previously existed. So, some of the things that he's talking about make great sense. I am looking forward to reviewing that document. One of the things that we certainly can't overlook is the statute that creates TBARTA and covers the roles and responsibilities that we have to fulfill. And it does, in fact, say in there that TBARTA must provide administrative services to the CCC. So as we're talking about developing language for a memorandum and outlining roles and responsibilities, we still will need to fulfill that statutory obligation for administrative services. The statute remains silent on what those services are. So when Whit talks about, hosting meetings and providing information on our website, all those things will still apply, but certainly the services won't be as robust as they have been over the past several years, and certainly services that wouldn't require contributions of $30,000 or however much the Hillsborough MPO and the others have been kind enough to provide TBARTA.
So may I follow up just real quickly, Madam Chair? Thank you. So my comments, based on what David has shared with us, is that we might be wise to just think about temporarily sitting on this issue until after the session is over with, to see whether or not they make a change in the statute and take the CCCs out of our responsibilities, because that would change somewhat the way we move forward, right?
Well, our hope is that this memo would meet the legislative intent, and we could demonstrate that we're meeting that intent. Certainly it needs to be reviewed. I think it probably needs a legal review as well. So I'd like to at least continue that review process and see where we are in the next couple of 3 months. And if we can agree, we need to know probably by November if we're going to move to this new platform. Even if we go back to the rotating schedule, I think there's probably something we can work out so that TBARTA is still fulfilling, and they're comfortable that they're still fulfilling their statutory obligations. And you know, it also speaks to a little bit of another issue, is that the legislature, or the legislation, has been silent a little bit on exactly how projects developed and managed and led by TBARTA get incorporated into the MPO planning framework and advanced in the MPO planning framework. And that's a little bit of a gray area in federal and state legislation. So we're going to have to continue to meet and work together and collaborate. And I'm a big believer that, you know, just good communication can overcome gray areas in legislation.
Yep. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good job. So now we have update on regionally. Yeah. Mhm.
Are we going to get a copy of that memo?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Sure, I'd be happy to share a copy
I'd
of
like a
that. And when the memo's ready, you'll all get a copy of the memo.
Update on regionally significant projects.
Thank you, and I will kick this one off. So we have been talking for some time about our updates of our long-range transportation plans and how we are coordinating those across county lines. And so since we are coming up on the time when all good MPOs in this region will be adopting our updates of our long-range plans, we wanted to circle back to the TMA and talk about some of the regionally significant projects that we see including in these plans. So just some quick background. Of course, we did that Tri-County survey summer before last to establish some of our values and our vision for the Tri-County area in terms of growth and key investments. And we had prepared last December, January timeframe, a Tri-County vision map that looks at managing growth and making some key investments in transit as well as in our highway system. And so we've been using that in Hillsborough as part of our plan development process. So last summer, summer of 2018, establishing goals and objectives and public engagement. Then since then, we've been going through the identification of needed improvements, and we followed up with our own Hillsborough level survey this past summer to look at some of the specific projects and get feedback from our residents. And I imagine the other two MPOs have been doing kind of similar processes, and they'll have an opportunity to comment on that in just a moment. But here's some highlights from Hillsborough of some of the projects that we've been looking at. So coming out of that vision, looking at express toll lanes on the interstate highway system and also on the Selman Expressway. Again, this uses the managed lanes concept to pay a toll that is potentially higher at rush hours. And we have been comparing how the projects on our needs assessment list perform against one another in terms of the potential to reduce vehicle hours of delay in the future year. And this does assume that there is that population growth that you saw kind of illustrated very broadly on the Tri-County Vision Map. So assuming that population growth, some of these projects would do a lot to reduce delay. I-275, say from the Howard Franklin Bridge to Ashley, adding lanes there. On I-4 from the downtown interchange to Polk County, stars there for reducing delay. But we have also been looking at some of the topics that would need to be addressed in advancing projects like that. So we've been looking at are there areas where there is a large concentration of populations protected under the Executive Order for Environmental Justice. And so that's what that note in the right-hand column is with the EJ top 20%. So we've been kind of following this procedure, moving through some of our areas. Another concept that we looked at and talked about a little bit at the regional level, at a staff level, was looking at elevated express lanes on some major roads. So similar to what is being built right now on Gandy Boulevard in South Tampa, east end of the Gandy Bridge and connecting over to the Selman Expressway, where it heads down from downtown Tampa. So taking a concept like that, testing it on some other roads like Hillsborough Avenue potentially to make a connection over to Pinellas, between Pinellas and the Veterans Expressway, or looking at US 301 in southern Hillsborough County. Again, that would be an extension of the Selman Expressway, but taking that farther south into some of our rapidly growing areas. Dale Mabry Highway, another idea to try to address the traffic demand there. And we also looked at the potential for new express lanes on the Gandy Bridge itself. So again, testing those, several of those were in our top performers for reducing delay. But a couple of them did have some issues that will need to be addressed if the projects move forward. So Hillsborough Avenue, for example, some environmental justice populations, US 301 in South County, there's some wildlife corridors there. There are some projects on state highways that we looked at that are outside of our urban services boundary. And so this raises a lot of questions for us about how do we try to manage growth if we are adding lanes in some of these areas. But one of these is one that we have talked about a lot at a staff level with PASCO, and that is US 301. So that widening US 301 heading up towards the Pasco County line would be right next to some environmental areas and is outside the urban services boundary. It also isn't one of our top performers from a congestion reduction point of view. We've had some discussion this morning about some transit projects, including reusing the CSX rail corridors for transit service, and so we tested those as well. These are shown highlighted on this map. This doesn't mean that there has been a decision about specific routes or a decision about specific technologies. This is intended to be a very schematic kind of analysis to see where would you start investing in a transit system. So we tested CSX freight rail corridors. We tested a couple of water transit routes. We tested, what if there's a new transit route between downtown Tampa and the West Shore Airport area running in its own right-of-way. Obviously, it's not determined yet where exactly that would go. And this is, again, shown against the future year population density and job density. The orange is the job density, and the green is the population density. So our forecast does assume that all of these services are in operation at the same time. So the caveat there is that if you start with just one, the ridership might be a little less than what we had forecast, because they do feed each other, and also that our forecast assumed an expansion of our bus network to about 2.5 times the amount of bus service that we have out there right now, presuming that that would be supported by our sales tax. And this is how that turned out, just in terms of the amount of ridership per mile on those different corridors. So the centrally located ones that tie into downtown Tampa and go across to the West Shore Airport area or up to the USF area, those had the greatest riders per mile, followed by the line that goes west along Bush and Linebaugh and heads over to Oldsmar and winds up in Pinellas County. So this would be sort of an indication of where we might want to start growing a regional transit system, based on our Tri-County Vision Map. And next up, I thought I was going to turn this over to Pinellas, but I just wanted to close with some highlights of our survey. Over the summer, we had about 5,200 responses from people who either live or work in Hillsborough County on 15 different improvement concepts. And what you're seeing here is they're ranked from the ones that had the most positive responses to the fewest positive responses. Over on the right-hand side is the people who voted no, and the gray area in between is people who didn't vote at all on these particular projects. So again, very small text. The ones that are up at the top with a lot of yes votes: reuse freight rail tracks, rapid transit between downtown and the airport, extend the downtown streetcar, greenway and trail corridors, right-sizing Tampa multi-lane roads. And then we get to elevated express lanes on major roads, a new water transit system, and some new roads in the area of the I-4, I-75 interchange, which is an economic development area, focus area for us. So now I'm going to turn it over to Pinellas.
All right, well, we're in a very similar situation to Hillsborough County in that we are working on our long-range transportation plan right now. We've also been doing a lot of outreach. We participated in the regional online survey last year. We did a statistically valid survey of the public. We have also been going out to all of our different communities, talking about various modal priorities. And we also did an online survey during the month of July and got just about 5,000 responses on that. What we've seen from all of our outreach has been consistent, whether it's been statistically valid in North County, in South County, everywhere we've gone. Our residents do not want more roads, which is also consistent with what we had talked about earlier. We don't have a whole lot of more roads to widen. So as we move into our long-range transportation plan, what we're looking at doing with our most flexible funds is flexing those to other uses. We're looking at funding complete streets projects, investing in technology, regional transit set-asides, and also set-asides for transit capital replacement for our local system. So I'm not going to have a whole lot of updates on major road projects that we're planning because for the most part we are going to be done, but I did want to walk through a few projects that we do have upcoming that are of regional significance. On US 19 in Pinellas County, we do have an interchange planned for Curlew Road. That's in northern Pinellas County. The slide says 2023. It's actually funded in 21-22. So that'll be the next one in the progress of US 19 improvements. And then after that, we do have planned interchanges at Tampa and Nebraska roads. Again, Tampa Road is a big east-west connection, as is Curlew, so we are moving forward with interchange construction on those corridors. We are going up US 19. We're currently working with the Florida Department of Transportation and evaluating some innovative intersections, knowing that there's not a lot of east-west traffic in those areas, and the interchange construction is very expensive, so maybe there are some at-grade solutions that we could be pursuing. So those will be coming soon in the next few years as well. And also on I-275, we do have express lanes currently under construction from the Howard Franklin Bridge to just about Roosevelt Boulevard. Currently, that's just one express lane in each direction, but the department is currently evaluating the addition of a second express lane. Because just south of that, from 54th Avenue South up to Roosevelt Boulevard, funded as a design-build project in 2024, we do have a lane continuity improvement to help out the weaving that has to occur for you to drive through the corridor. And that project will also include the construction of 2 express lanes from I-375 at downtown St. Petersburg up to Roosevelt to connect into that Howard Franklin Bridge replacement project. And then another one is the Gandy Boulevard corridor. There is a project development environment study currently underway. We're going to be looking at partially controlled access improvements in Pinellas County. Currently we have the overpasses at 16th, MLK, and 4th Street. That'll be continuing those overpasses past Derby Lane and out to the Gandy Bridge. It will also include replacing that bridge and multi-use trail along the corridor, as well as connections to local trail projects in Hillsborough and Pinellas County, and also connections to the Selman extension. One other big regional project that we have that is currently wrapping up is the Gateway Area Master Plan. The Gateway Area, it's a very loosely defined area. It's about 30 square miles. And it's very disconnected. And there was a discussion earlier about connectivity. This study is really looking at integrating land use and transportation. We've identified multimodal connections through the area, additional trail connections, roadway connections, and transit connections to really enhance productivity in the area. A lot of the properties are underutilized and they have poor access. So we've identified some opportunities to intensify development, redevelop the areas, and really just get bigger bang for your buck for redevelopment in this area. And that was all I had for Pinellas County updates.
Thank you.
If I could add something real quick to that. Chelsea mentioned the I-275 Express Lane project down to 375 in downtown St. Petersburg. There's a public hearing on that September 24th at 5:30 at the First Baptist Church, St. Petersburg. And that'll have the public will have an opportunity to review the concepts, the plans, pond locations. There are some likely right-of-way impacts there. And so I would encourage folks who are interested in that project or concerned about that project to please come to the public hearing on the 24th of September for that. And then also the Gateway Master Plan. I just want to say, I can't say enough about the partnership we've had with FDOT on that. That's a master plan that was funded in part by our 4 local governments and our agency, and then DOT came in with matched that with half the money for the master plan. Plus, they're doing an intermodal center feasibility plan for that area, and we've narrowed that down to a few potential sites, and we're really excited about that being a catalyst for the redevelopment in that area to get some real, true transit-oriented development in an area that's sorely lacking in any sort of walkability or connectivity.
Thank you. Is this presentation, is there comments?
So yeah,
Yes,
for
Commissioner
Pasco,
Wells.
we're so sorry. We obviously didn't coordinate very well. We didn't get our slide presentation to them, but we'll just verbalize a few things. So I think what you're seeing is you have one county that has congestion issues, one county that's grown out, and we're the growing county. So we're all at different phases of our development, so we have very different interests, even though we have a lot of things in common. So our primary projects are related to really movement around the county. So we think we're going to get approval from Ridge Road. We really badly need a parallel road on 54. Ridge Road is an east-west corridor, and over the long term, we hope it can go all the way to I-75. So 52 also is under some expansion. So for us, we need that east-west network other than 54. 54 was intended to be the beautiful east-west corridor, but as you know, the growth and development. I had a friend who worked in he lives in New Tampa. He commuted to Pasco County for 15 years. I said, how many lights were there when you started? He said 3, and I drove down, there's 33 and more to come. So it's that type of thing that we're working on, is to make sure that we have the parallel roads to keep our movement and keep traffic able to move more freely. We don't have the congestion issues yet, but one of the things that we're working hard on is multimodal plans related to transportation demand management. We don't have the need that you have down south, but we have to start getting the community aware that there's other options to the car. There are van pools. Transit will be more robust in future, and telecommuting and other options are something we're going to push through our MPO. We want to work on things with transit-oriented development. Dave Sobush's group has done a tremendous job of putting together economic competitive measures, so transit being a really key component, transit-oriented development being a key component, pedestrian-oriented development. Those are things we're trying to do in our land use code and work more aggressively with the development community so that we don't just have beautiful village communities, we actually have ones that are a little bit more functional for getting away from the vehicle. Other big projects are our Overpass Road. The county owns a lot of land in that corridor, so we received a grant to develop some land there and create some jobs, and so that overpass will be significant for that transportation and that accessibility. The 4154 interchange, which is really the toughest one in our county, is under a PD&E with FDOT, so we believe in due course it may be an overpass or something of that nature, but it's really a conflict zone, and it really is not something that's going to get better in due course, and so that's a significant project for us that's underway. And then the other thing we're working on, which we all are, is the TSMO, the Transportation System Management Operations. They were a little stalled, the group out of Metroplan that's going to come and do some assessments for us and help us with some of those traffic issues. Do we need to have things like trucks that can come in immediately and pull people out of lanes when there's accidents? Signal coordination, we're having to do a little bit more of that in our county. So that's another focus that we want to work on. And then, of course, resiliency, working with TBPRC. So those are the focus areas for our multimodalism. But essentially, all of these kinds of projects, the infrastructure projects, need to be completed so that we have a full east-west, north-south corridor, and then we can start working on these treatments, such as TSMO and TDMs and that sort of thing. So that's really the primary focus. And just one more point, a lot of that focus is not just our planning. It comes from the MetroQuest surveys that we undertook as a group last year, and over 6,000 Pasco respondents came up with a lot of these suggestions. So they actually feel the pain now, they actually see where issues are, and they actually want solutions. So our time is coming where we have to be as responsive as we can be. I have a fear that in 5 years we'll look back and say, what the heck just happened? But the reality is we can still get ahead of the curve if we continue to plan well.
Are we all, you're finished? Okay, thank you so much. Did you have something to say, Commissioner?
Yeah, we actually are doing a feasibility study right now, which will lead into a PD&E. We're trying to determine which options are actually feasible and what the cost. We do have money in the work program in later years to look at right-of-way acquisition, but we're now going through the feasibility process. We are doing an interim improvement that's under construction now that'll help a little bit, but.
When that will be
I'm
over?
gonna look to my guys in the back. Do we know when that feasibility study will be done, Richard? The feasibility study should end up probably later this year or early next year. Yeah, so I can get you exact dates. So.
For those of you who are, you may not be aware, a few years ago, we had an unsolicited bid come in to double deck State Road 54 that took a look at that. It ended up not happening. They thought they could do it with private money, and then I think they wanted $400 million from the state, if that's the number I remember. But so. We know 54 is an issue, and that especially 5441. So I know everyone looks forward to a solution there, whatever it ends up being. Thank you.
Great. And do we have any more comments? Ms. Alden?
Thank you so much. So just one more thing to kind of bring this in for a landing. We've been talking about what would a regional long-range transportation plan look like, and that Tri-County Vision Map was a first step towards that. We've had some discussions at the staff level about next year, after we have all gone through the process of identifying our cost feasible projects and bringing those to public hearing, bringing them all back together and putting them all on the map together, and showing what is our strategic direction. These are our priorities, what we want to work on together as a region for the next few years. So hopefully we'll be bringing that back to you in early 2020.
Great. Okay, we'll move on here, and you would have been here. And we'll go to the final, the update on the T-BARTA planning activities.
Good morning. I'm Brian Passaro. I'm a principal planner with T-BARTA. I'm here to give you an update on the Regional Rapid Transit PD&E study, as well as the Regional Transit Development Plan. First, with the PD&E study, it's been underway since May. The goal is to have the PD&E study wrapped up within 28 months. So that puts us out to fall of 2021. When the PD&E study is done, we will have accomplished 4 things. We will have completed the necessary environmental review. We'll have 30% of the design complete. We will hopefully have the project adopted in the cost-feasible LRTPs of the 3 MPOs. And we'll have enough information to put together into a packet to the Federal Transit Administration so that they can evaluate it and rate it to see if it's worth federal funding. Right now in the study, we are focused on the stations. The BRT Catalyst, or the Regional Transit Feasibility Study, from which the BRT project originated, identified 21 station locations. We're taking a closer look at them right now to see if we need to refine either the number or the locations. We had a kickoff meeting of what we're calling the Stations Working Group, which is composed of land use planning staff and MPO staff from the 3 MPOs. Once we nail down the number and location of the stations, then we can move into looking at the design of the stations, and we can start talking about ingress and egress from the stations. Other work we've been doing, today we are launching the project website for the study. It'll include an interactive map where people can go, they can go to exactly on the map where they want to leave a comment on. It also includes a pretty exciting informational video that we developed, and we're going to add to that video as the project progresses. So that's the PD&E. With the TDP, TBARTA's first transit development plan, it's due to FDOT September of 2020. We have finished documenting the existing demographic conditions within the 5-county area. What we're doing now is we're wrapping up documentation of the current state of transit service within the 5-county area. So for example, how many routes are at 60-minute headways, at 30-minute headways, 50-minute headways. We've done a 5-year trend analysis of the 5 transit systems within the 5-county area. We've met with transit staff from all 5 transit agencies to get their input on, what do they see as TBARTA's role in the future as a regional transit authority. We've also asked for the input on a proposed regional transit vision network. The TDP is going to include a peer review of 6 other regional transportation authorities from across the country to see if there's any ideas that we can borrow from them. In July, we wrapped up an online survey that was focused on engaging public awareness of and attitudes towards regional transit. In October, we're going to launch another survey, a MetroQuest survey, that's going to ask the public to help us identify regional transit priorities, short-term strategies, long-term strategies. And in November, the TBARTA board is going to have a workshop, and at this workshop, we're going to ask for feedback from our board on topics such as, what is TBARTA's role in transit planning within the 5-county area? Is TBARTA going to be an actual operator of transit service? Questions like that. So that's the update on the 2 projects, and I'll be happy to take any questions you have.
Any questions? I have one.
Sure.
When you talk about putting it into the MPO tips and costs, what local contribution are you expecting, and where would it come from?
In
terms of both capital and operating.
In order for the project to enter into the FTA's capital investment grant program, we have to demonstrate that there is a reasonable expectation of a local match for the federal project, either at the state or local level. What that amount is and where it's going to come from exactly is still to be determined.
So
but in order for, you can't even get into the capital, you can't even get into the CIG program until you've demonstrated that.
So the state could be the total local match. Could do the total match for the feds without any local contributions?
In theory,
the state matches local funds. We'll do half of the non-federal funds is typically what our role is.
Okay, so if there were no local contributions, let's say from Hillsborough County, how would that affect funding?
It would have to be made up from somewhere else, but in theory, but I don't know how the project would proceed.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Overman?
Being on the HART board, I'm still sort of at a loss at what where everything is going with TBARTA as far as the plan. We haven't gotten an update in a while. But given that there would be a local match requirement, and it would probably have to come through either the county or the HART budgets, what efforts are being done to coordinate with the local transit agencies, like, for example, your agency as well as yours, in terms of utilizing efficiencies between the local transit service and the service that you're looking at as far as the regional level?
Well, in terms of what we're doing to coordinate, we meet on, I believe, a monthly, if not bi-weekly basis with the leadership teams from HART, PCPT, and PSTA to keep them abreast on what we're doing in the study, and to also to make sure that that the regional rapid transit isn't going to be duplicating service that's already being provided by local routes.
Okay, that's kind of where I was going with that. Yeah, I'd love to get a copy of your most recent report. Thank you.
If I could add, I think we're also, as Brian mentioned, taking a real hard look at the number of stations. And just making sure, because if it's going to be rapid, you probably don't want 21 stations, right?
Yeah.
And then also making sure that those stations, to the best of their ability, can really truly be places that are active, walkable places. And I'm as committed to that as Commissioner Kemp and anybody else, to make sure that if you're having a transit station, it's got to be walkable. But we also have to recognize that this is a different market, maybe, than certain local fixed route service, and that may dictate some differences in what you see in terms of service characteristics and operational characteristics. So we're confident that T-BARTA's got the good team in place that knows this stuff and has good national experience, and we're eager to participate and see where it leads us. But I think we're still, we're 18 months, 20 months away from any kind of substantive decisions about what it's going to cost and how it might get funded locally. But I'm keeping my Board of County Commissioners apprised, because the reality is that's probably where the funding is going to have to come from, because the cities don't really have a lot of financial resources, and the MPOs certainly don't. And the transit agencies, I can speak for Brad, we don't have a ton of revenue right now, so we have to really give this a lot of thought over the next few months.
Can I
Sure.
respond to that? And I that's actually where I was going with this. It's really not the agencies that we're talking to, it's actually our counties, because I came from an area where there were regional transportation assets that help people get around. They were designed with not necessarily stations in what I think our area is conceived of as stations, but as basically, not park and rides, but, kiss and rides. But with that, as we may recognize, is that when these kinds of assets are created in communities, the economic development that goes along with it, along with the zoning that goes along with it, needs to be coordinated. Because what happens when you bring an asset that is valuable to our commuters, which is typically what a BRT would serve for the most part, people start moving close to it, especially if it is walkable. And so I think it's going to be critically important that coordination with the land use and zoning conversations, so that we're best prepared for being able to create opportunity in those zones, rather than displacement and conflict in those zones. As citizens come to the table and go, oh, you're going to do what? We'll be better prepared for being able to address how people embrace what the investment it's going to take to make this happen. So thank you.
Yeah, and I've said it before, but I'll just say I express my concern that it's from what was put out here before, a $455 million project with $430 million spent on these stations, which they call multimodal centers, but which are parking garages. I've been to the one at the airport in Orlando, and I have never seen a model. Nobody can show me a model for anything but parking garages. But I'd appreciate if there were something other than that. And I just say the same consultant who did this study also did a 2014 study where he recommended express bus, and it had 7 stops, which in the region, which makes sense to me because that's how you move people if you want to move them regionally. On express buses, which is what they do between Fort Lauderdale and Miami very successfully. But I'll just add those comments as we go on. But I don't know if there's any other comments. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So I guess that is the meeting's adjourned unless anyone else has any other comments to add. Sure.
Our next meeting is going to be November 8th, and is anyone going to go to the large urban conference that's going to be done in Miami, that Miami-Dade's putting on with NACO? Just curious. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Sure, Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, first of all, really appreciated the staff's presentations, the individual county presentations, and I think the effort that we're talking about through the LRTP and obviously completing that this fall and then coming back and kind of looking at a big map of where those projects are, maybe find some real common ground for regional stuff. I mean, all this transportation and transit discussion starts within our own communities and clearly get answers and then we kind of, how do we connect kind of thing. So I really like that, the way we're going with that. The other thing that it was really great having the senator here today and to Councilmember Rice's comments. I just think if nothing else, and I really appreciated the staff's effort to try to have a second, I think it was Representative Toledo that was going to be here. I'm sorry that she couldn't. I'm sure there's good reasons. I'm just saying I think it's good that we continue to try to have some state representatives at any of our meetings, even if we only have one person, because just to kind of, like let them know what we're doing here, because sometimes they say there's nothing going on. Well, there's a lot going on. Sometimes it's in spite of them, and sometimes it's with them. I finished that. It's both. Sometimes it's together. But I just think to have those folks at the table is really a good idea. And if there's just one extra voice up there that says, I did meet with those folks. There's some really good things going on. I think it's a good thing. So I just would hope that we continue to do that, even if there's not a, quote, legislative. We can always add a legislative discussion, and if there's nobody here, we'll just move past it. But if we can have somebody here all the time, I think it would be a good thing. Thank you.
Sure, Commissioner Overman.
To dovetail on that, as Senator Rasan mentioned on Monday, the Hillsborough delegation's going to be getting together to listen to not only the leadership, but also constituents and the things that they bring to the table to discuss and take back with them in Tallahassee. I would imagine there's the same delegation in Pinellas and Pasco. I went last year and got an opportunity to speak early on more about the Sadowski's Trust Fund than anything else, but it was really valuable to sit in that meeting, because what you have, not only the results we get from the surveys that each of our respective MPOs do, but the people that will take the time to sit there all day waiting to have an opportunity to talk to their to their representative, are there and oftentimes are the voice of our communities. So I encourage everyone to have an opportunity, if you have the time and leisure ability to actually get there, to sit in on those meetings, because you can learn a lot from the way that people that are actively participating in a voice in our community present to our legislators and are going to show up in Tallahassee if they can figure out how to. So I found it very, very valuable last year. So.
And I mean,
Sure.
and I wanted to point out, Representative Toledo was mentioned. I believe her legislative aide is here. So just in case, just to make that known.
Great. Sure, Ms. Alden.
Thank you. And Senator Rasan spoke about the resolution that our county legislative delegation will take up on Monday, supporting the I-275 State Route 60 interchange project. We did provide copies of that resolution to you. It has lots and lots of whereas statements, or we tried to beef up all of the reasons why we should try to move forward with this project as soon as possible. So whomever you would like to share that with, we would love the support.
So I never even had to use one of the gavels, but we're adjourned.